Ryan, good morning, man. Thanks for taking some time. 20 years goes by pretty fast, right? I mean, you probably still think you're in that 20 years ago mindset sometimes.
Yeah, it's wild to think that it's been 20 years. But it's been a fun 20 years. And, I think back to getting called up, and basically I was playing at UVA that spring, and then that September got called up in the big leagues, and I wondered, what the heck am I doing here? Do I belong? And, all those questions that everyone sort of thinks about when that happens. And now to be sitting here talking to you guys about how the Nats have been around for 20 years and, gone to the playoffs 5 times, won the World Series. It's been a pretty successful 20 years for, I don't want to say an expansion team, but basically a team coming down from Canada and not having owners at the beginning. So we've done a lot in 20 years that I think we're pretty proud of.
Yeah, that's really a fair point, too, because Major League Baseball was operating the Expos at the time of the transition. Good point. And by the way, the home run was at Nats Park. That was the kick to open the new stadium.
What do you remember about the homer, Ryan? Take us
So I
through
remember
it.
the first pitch was a heater right down the middle, and the umpire called it. So then, so I got to see a free one, and then I looked back at McCann, and I was like, "Where was that?" And he's like, "I don't know." But I think I've always said getting a new stadium, I think, was the first step in relevance for the Nationals franchise. And RFK is a stadium that has a lot of history in DC, and people loved it. But a baseball team needs to have their own stadium. It needs to be their identity, their home field, where their fans come. And I think even the area around it, the Navy Yard, has blossomed and grown so much over the last 20 years. Like, having that stadium and opening that stadium for that year was really the first year, in my opinion, of the organization. And, we had some lean years at the beginning, but, for a good decade there, we were either in the playoffs or in the playoff hunt. And it was a fun time for the fans and obviously for the players.
No, it's been amazing. So, the interesting thing for me, we were celebrating 20 years of the Nationals, but they were the Expos. And then now, as years go by, that distances itself away from the Expos a little bit. But you were close enough to understand, hey, we're the Expos now, the Nationals. So how much did that play into? How much did you hear about that, like the Expos, and did those former players and that thought of that team? How often was that?
Yeah, and I think a lot of the guys I played with at the beginning of my career played in Montreal for a few years and talked about how much they love the city. And at the beginning, I think the Nationals were trying to create their own identity, and there was kind of that divide between the Expos and the Nationals. And as time has gone on, and I think this is a good thing, we've sort of embraced the history of Montreal as well. And there was some really good teams that played in Montreal and some great players. And we've sort of kind of cooled off on that and started to bring the history of the Expos along with us. So it's been fun to watch that and to learn about the history of Montreal. And baseball in Canada, obviously they're still in Toronto, but the fans in Montreal and the stadium there, I heard, was a special place to play. And so I'm all for kind of embracing both organizations and celebrating the history of two great teams.
So I just saw Jim Bowden in there at the early days. Man, you guys have been through some really good baseball people.
Think about like all the people that cycled through there during Ryan's 16
Frank
years.
Robinson,
Manny Acta, Riggleman, a lot of guys that had a lot of skin in the game here. And even some of the teammates you had, Brian, a lot of personalities, different ends of the spectrum. Adam Dunn, Worth, Niger Morgan went through there for a while. Not just limited to this group that we're seeing on the screen. Who are some of the personalities that kind of crafted you as a younger guy that you played with?
Yeah, at the very beginning, on the first year or two, I had guys like Brian Schneider and Nick Johnson, and Royce Clayton helped me out a ton. He was there for a few years. And, that was back when I was honestly just learning how to be a professional. And a lot of those guys, those veteran guys, when I was 20, 21 years old, taught me how to go about my business on a day-to-day basis, taught me how to do things correctly when we traveled and how to prepare for games. And, so those first 3 to 5 years, I always say, are so important when you have veteran guys that can teach you how to be a pro and how to do things the right way. And then, a lot of the guys you just put up on the screen, a lot of the guys you mentioned, Matt, Niger Morgan, and Dimitri Young. Dimitri Young would be a good one to throw
Yeah.
out there. Um, a lot of personalities, but also just a lot of good players. And I talk to a lot of those guys still, and a lot of those players played many other cities. And people like all cities, but one thing that they did say about DC is it's one of the coolest cities to play in because there's so many things you can do there that you can't do anywhere else. All the museums, all the history, all the the political government stuff. We have opportunities to do a lot of things that other people don't. And so many people love their time in DC for that reason.
Yeah, when I played for the Orioles, I would go to Monument Park. I'd end up going up to D.C. a lot, to the Smithsonian and whatnot on off days. Hey, I want to ask you this. 2009 All-Star Gold Glove season, and then later you hurt your shoulder because people forget how good a third baseman you were. And then at the end of the career, you were gutting through it, trying to throw the ball. And what happened to his arm? So I want to ask you, what happened with the injury? Do you remember? Clearly you remember it.
Yep.
And tried to play through it. But what happened with the shoulder injury?
Yeah, I mean, and to this day, I say that was one of the toughest things that I went through because I came up as a defensive player. I got drafted because I was an elite defensive player. And speaking of Jim Bowden, who drafted me, he kind of said, if we can just get this guy to hit, it'll be a bonus. And it kind of, I mean, I still take pride in my defense, obviously, even after I moved to first. But I came up and that was sort of my calling card. So when I went through the shoulder injury and tried to play through it, developed some bad habits, tried to drop my arm angle, do a bunch of other things. For me, I think it was physical, but it was also mentally taxing on me. And I've talked about this, when you're going through it, you're just trying to do anything you can to help the team win. Nobody wants to make errors. Nobody wants to go out there, but going out there in front of 40,000 people when you don't know that you're very confident to be able to do what you're supposed to do is a tough place to be. So, I think that was, I would say, the hardest part of my career, but I think I also learned the most about myself. And then you get the surgery and you think, oh, I'll just come back and everything will be better. And it obviously didn't work out like that. But, I miss playing third base every day when I moved over to first. I loved first base. It's funny when Gerardo Parra came over and he was talking to one of our backup catchers one day that the backup catcher didn't even know I played third base, like you said. And Parra's like, dude, what are you talking about? This guy was a good third baseman. So it's fun to look back. And I'm a big believer in everything happens for a reason. And, everyone says, oh, well, if you didn't get hurt, you could have done this or you could have been that. And I said, yeah, I mean, you could always sit there and talk about what could have been or what could have happened. And, I moved to first base. I ended up, I think, being a pretty good first baseman. It probably let me play a little bit longer than maybe I would have been able to play, and got to win a World Series. And so, it was a really tough time and a hard time mentally for me. But, at the end of the day, I wouldn't change a thing about anything that happened.
Well, you could pick it, man. That's why I brought it up. You could pick it over
for
there
a defense-first guy, finished his career with over 1,000 RBIs. I want to ask you a little bit about the current Nationals, Ryan. I know you watch a little bit, still involved in what happens there. And Harold and I are both fans of your former boss, Mike Rizzo, and he's put together a really interesting group of young players, man, between Dylan Cruz and
James
Wood and Abrams. Like, this is a pretty fun team. Are we crazy in thinking that maybe the arrival date for this group could come a little sooner than what fans are expecting?
Yeah, I mean, it's been so much fun to be around and watch and get to know these young kids. And I can truly say that it's fun to root for them because they're all good kids and they want to play the game the right way. They want to work hard. They want to get better. It's funny, every single one that you just showed besides Dylan from that Soto trade that everyone freaked out about. So
yeah,
that turned out okay. I think they're fun to watch, and it takes me back to when I first started. And I was just talking, I needed some veteran guys to help lead the way and teach me how to do things correctly. And I don't make these decisions, but obviously I think we're in need of some people like that. But it is so much fun to watch these guys work on a daily basis and the talent of these guys is, it's so much better than when we were. I mean, there's so much more developed. Harold, you work with a lot of these young guys now, and I think their talent and their physical ability, I think, is light years ahead of where I was when I first came up. The hard part or the fun part for me now is teaching them the mental side of it, how to prepare, how to think 1 and 2 pitches ahead. And not that they don't know how to do that, but youth baseball is so much different now. A lot of these kids don't learn the intricacies of the game. So to be able to be around and try and help them and be in spring training for a week or two, it's something that I really enjoy now. And I started to enjoy it my last couple of years when I wasn't playing every day and got to help out people more. And, it almost makes you feel better when you see someone else succeed, almost better than you getting a hit. If you talk to someone and then they go out there and implement a strategy that you guys talked about, it almost feels better that they're getting the hit than you are. So it's, I've really enjoyed it. I look forward to watching these kids continue to mature. And, like you said, Mike does such a great job of putting a good roster together. And, if we can go out and get 1 or 2 impact guys, I mean, it's a tough division. I'm not saying anything crazy, but it's going to be fun to watch.
The rebuild is happening for sure. Hey, we really appreciate the visit. Ryan, thanks for taking some time with us. We're going to continue this narrative of stars from the 2000s because Michael Bourne's going to join us coming up next on Hot Stove. Ryan, appreciate you, man. Hope to see you down the road. As Bob Carpenter says, we'll see you later.
Yeah, tell Michael he didn't want to bunt on me either, so he can tell you about how much I.
Very good.
You want a Gold Glover for
Thanks,
nothing.
Jim.